Berna Gordon has appeared in numerous productions over more than 30 years. Some of her favourite roles were in A Kind of Loving, Kin to Transport, Belfry, and I Never Sang for My Father. Berna had her own drama school in Ovens for a number of years, and since moving to Cove, has been involved with Holbolan Theatre Group. I also hear she's a great cook and an intrepid traveller in her camper van. Berna is one of the most encouraging and supportive people in the theatre world in Cork. So sit back and enjoy Berna's memories of Cork Arts Theatre.
My name is Berna Gordon, and among other things, I'm an actor. My first performance on the old Cat Club stage was in a one-act play called Boomerang by Sue Townsend, who wrote The Diary of Adrian Mole. It was an Everyman Studio production, and it was directed by Tony Corbett, and this was in about 1988. It was very exciting for me because, having spent some years being involved with theatre groups, drama groups around Ballincollig and Ovens where I lived, this was my first foray into a production in Cork City. So it was new and exciting. The Everyman Studio Group used to put on a weekend of three one-act plays every so often, using new actors and new directors, and this was one of those productions. So it was very enjoyable. It was mainly a cast of females because the setting was a gynecologist's waiting room. So it was a very funny play and lots of fun to do. From the beginning, I loved the stage and the Cat Club and the little theatre itself. There was something about the close proximity of the audience that made it really special. You could almost reach out your hand and touch the people sitting in the front row. But somehow I wasn't intimidated by that. I actually thought that it added to the experience. It felt as if we were all in this together. The actors on stage telling the story, revealing secrets, whatever, and drawing the audience in. And because they were so physically close, that seemed, it was like a living thing. And they were absorbing it and giving back the energy to the players on the stage. So it was a very happy experience for me. I was definitely the oldest person in the cast, and that became sort of the norm, I think, in my theatrical career, because I was usually the mother. And a bit like that, I was also kind of the mammy in the dressing room. So if somebody needed a safety pin or needle and thread or a couple of paracetamol, I usually had them. My first full-length performance, a play in the Cat Club, was about 2 years later in a play called Female Transport by Steve Gooch. This was directed by Marion Wyatt for her Stage Centre company, and it was a wonderful production. The play itself depicted the transportation of a group of female petty criminals from the UK to Australia, and the trials and tribulations that they had to endure during the voyage. And the exciting thing about it was that the whole interior of the theatre was transformed into the ship. So you had sails going from ceiling to floor on the two side walls, and a gangplank going along the centre aisle leading up onto the stage. And again, it was a mainly female cast. I think there were 6 women and 3 men. And I made friends in that and production, friends that are, I appeared in many other plays with after that and are still, I consider, friends today. But my mother, my late mother, who was then in her 80s and very deaf, was very keen to come to the opening night. Now, I had a little trepidation about it, but she was so enthusiastic I couldn't really say no. So I did explain to her that it was different to other plays that I'd been in that the cast would not be entering on stage from the wings, that we would be coming through the audience. And I gave her a little resume, the synopsis of the storyline so that she'd be able to follow it. So on the opening night, the bar was full of people and the cast came down the stairs from the dressing rooms singing a sea shanty. And we lined up in the bar, and then the ship's captain, played by Ben McDowell, assisted by the late lovely Hugh Moynihan, who was playing one of the sailors, and they herded the audience into the theatre and before the prisoners were brought in onto the gangplank. So while we were there on the gangplank, a bit of a scuffle broke out and there was a bit of shouting, and while the prisoners were being brought kind of roughly up onto the stage and chained onto benches. So while this was going on, I heard loudly and clearly my mother's unmistakable voice saying, declaiming really, how are they going to do the play with all those people up on the stage? And they're shouting and they're making such noise. So she gave a very cross shh to us. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to put up with this for the next 2 hours? And what if she keeps on talking? She's sitting up at the front. And how am I going to remember my lines? And it's going to upset everybody. Anyway, fortunately, my sister-in-law, who was minding her for the evening, gave her a very firm shh. And that was the end. There wasn't another peep out of her, thankfully. With regard to parties, I think most of the wild parties in the Cat Club took place before my involvement, because I didn't really witness any of the really wild parties, I don't think. Some very enjoyable after parties when a show finished with a few drinks and chats and laughs. And the bar in the old Cat Club was extremely warm and friendly, and I think it was nearly bigger than the theatre. It seemed that way anyway. And different groups had their own favourite place to sit. And there was a piano in the corner, and invariably somebody would go up and lift the lid and play the piano, and there'd be a sing-song. And that was really enjoyable. Though I must say that I found closing nights of a play quite sad, because you left the stage on a high, and all the hugging and everything, it's our last night, and up the stairs to change out of our costumes and take off the makeup. And when you came back downstairs 30 or 40 minutes later and walked into the theatre, the stage was now a hive of industry, and the crew had the set almost dismantled. And this I always found sad. You knew then definitely that this play that had consumed you for maybe weeks was most decidedly over. But one particular night I do remember, I don't know what the production was, but we were having a few drinks. It was the closing night, and the younger members of the cast were talking about going clubbing. And they mentioned the club that they were intending to go to, and they were trying to persuade me to come with them. And I thought, no, let them off. And then after a couple of drinks, I began to think, sure, why not? I was going to get a taxi home anyway. And so they were all delighted I was going to come with them. So I went off upstairs to get my belongings from the dressing room. And somewhere between the bar and the dressing room, I sobered up. And it dawned on me that my daughter, who was then in college, had frequented that particular club, and perhaps if she wasn't there, some of her friends might have been there, and what if they told her that they saw her mother in a nightclub? So I saw sense, gathered my belongings together and slipped off down the stairs, didn't go back into the bar, and got my taxi home to my husband and my 4 children. Another play I remember in the Cat Club with great fondness, this was also in the old Cat Club, was a play called Belfry by Billy Roach, part of the Wexford trilogy. This was directed by Maureen O'Byrne. And for a change, I wasn't the mother, I was the lover. And the play was set in the belfry of the church, where the sacristan, Artie, played by Paul Crichton, and the flower arranger for the church, the altar, Angela, a married woman, were having an affair. So it was nice for a change to be doing something that had a little bit of spice to it. But along with the vagaries of life on stage, about 2 years later, I played Paul Crichton's mother in I Never Sang for My Father by Robert Anderson. That was another wonderful and memorable production. It was directed by the recently late, lamented Mick McCarthy. And in the lead role was the also late and lamented Cork acting royalty, which was Michael Toomey. So that was a thoroughly enjoyable play, and I have happy memories of it. And recently I discovered, thanks to Ray Casey, that it was available to watch on YouTube. And so last week my husband and I sat down and watched I Never Sang for My Father. And it was lovely. It brought back so many happy memories of a play that I was in over 20 years ago. I did perform in a couple of plays in the New Cat Club, including By the Bog of Cats by Marina Carr, directed by Maureen O'Byrne, who had also directed Belfry. And that was in, I think, 2008, and an enjoyable production also. In more recent years, I've been involved with All Bowling Theatre Group and directing some one-act plays for them. And we always entered the one-act drama festival circuit in the autumn and always took part in the festival held at the Cork Arts Theatre, and got a great welcome and great cooperation and help from all the crew there, from Dolores, of course, and Angela MacDonald and her Jackie and all the other people on her committee, to put on the play. So it was a different experience, but very enjoyable experience nonetheless. When COVID struck last year, I was actually rehearsing for an Old Coward play, Present Laughter, which was to open in the Cat Club on the week after Easter 2020. That was directed by Mary Curtin, and it had a wonderful cast, quite a large cast. And my hope is that that will happen in the not too distant future. And my wish for this little theatre, the Cat Club, which has such a special place in my heart, I have a real soft spot for it, is that it will continue to thrive and to flourish and to be there for the theatre community in Cork and for the audiences for many, many generations to come. Sin a will.